I can tell you is this. I hope that you are ready to get beaten over the head by one of Stephen King's most frightening works. Because, like we told you last week on episode 6, we are going neck deep on Pet Sematary. Are you about ready to kick this thing off?
I am. I am ready to dig it up.
There we go. So, we've got a lot to cover this week. We're going to start with Pet Sematary 1989, the original adaptation, rated R, directed by Mary Lambert, of course, written by Stephen King, and starring Dale Midkiff, Denise Crosby, the one and only Fred Gwynne, and Brad Greenquist as Victor Pascow. Like I said, this is one of King's most frightening novels, so let's jump into the TV spot and see how well the creep carries over.
What is this place?
I brought you here to bury Alan's cat.
Daddy, is church all right?
Why, Judge?
I have my
Alright.
reasons.
I dreamed he got hit by a car and you and Mr. Crandall buried him in the Pet Sematary.
What did we do tonight, Judge?
What we did, Lois, was a secret.
May the Lord bless you and keep you.
Has anyone ever buried a person up there?
May the Lord make his face to shine upon you.
You're thinking thoughts best not thought of.
Daddy's gonna do something really bad.
You're thinking of putting him up there. Don't deny the thought hadn't crossed your mind.
Come back to me, Gage. Come back to us.
Paramount Pictures presents Stephen King's all-time best-selling tale of horror. Pet Sematary.
Alright, so that is a really good trailer. I think it does a good job of playing it and getting you ready for this movie. This movie is definitely very weird and strange, and it takes it's definitely it's a new level, like a mental level. This is because especially now you think about how much people love their pets, and I know there are quite a few people, my mother included, who would love to have a cemetery that could bring dead animals back to life.
Do that. Yeah, it's definitely a really interesting concept, and I thought the trailer does a really good job of previewing the movie. What you see far too often this day and age is the movies. I think what it is that the movies themselves don't have enough meat, so the trailer ends up giving away the entire story, and that may sound like a knock on the 2019 version, and maybe in a way it is, but you get so many times you get so much spoilers in the trailer, and when we get to the trailer for the newest incarnation, I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think this one is a really solid trailer overall, and it does a really good job of previewing the movie, which is ultimately what a trailer should do. This movie is fantastic. The book is fantastic. I think that this movie is actually the best, to date at least, the best adaptation of Stephen King's work, and the book itself is fantastic. I've read the book. I've also listened to the book on audiobook read by Michael C. Hall, which was fantastic. But what makes this book so good, in my opinion, is there's so many parallels to Stephen King's actual life in this book. So he lived in a house next to a road. There was an oil company up the street, so there was constantly tankers driving up and down the road. He had his friend, his neighbor became his good friend across the street. There was actually even a pet cemetery behind the house, and that's where the spelling for cemetery came from. Is the actual sign for the real pet cemetery that was located behind his house was misspelled, so he carried that over. During the time that they lived there, his daughter's cat Smucky got ran over and got buried in the pet cemetery. There's also, in the movie and in the book, the gravestone for Smucky makes an appearance,
Mm-hmm.
and even what his daughter put on Smucky's gravestone is in the book and in the movie. So there's just so many parallels to his real life living in that house at that time, even up to and including his son had an incident where he ran towards the road, and Stephen King said that he couldn't remember if his son tripped or if he got to him before he got to the road. But obviously he didn't make it to the road. But just real terrifying stuff, and I think that's what made the book so good, is that so much of it was based on things that actually happened or places that actually existed during the time that he lived at that house.
Yeah, I think that the turning that book into this movie, they did a really good job. It was directed by Mary Lambert, who before Pet Sematary only had one other feature film. Other than
Mm-hmm.
that, she directed pop music videos like Madonna's "Like a Prayer." But George Romero was originally supposed to direct this, but they they had to stop. Had to postpone production. He ended up dropping out to go do something else. And actually, Tom Savini also passed up directing this film. But
those both would have made like really interesting. I mean, I would have to say that if either one of them made this movie, it would have been better. Not that it's not great, but holy shit! Like, how good could those two versions of this movie been?
oh yeah, for sure. Here's one thing I did notice, and you see this a lot in movies, but when Gage is running towards the road, and right when he gets to the road, or right before he gets there, that truck is a long ways from him, right? But the dude, you always already like, I guess, so they know, so they can show the audience that it's a big rig. You always hear like a horn blowing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so is this dude just like a one man truck driving band, and he's just like jamming out, honking his horn as he's coming? It's like, oh, I don't know, it cracks me up when I see stuff like that.
There's so many things that they drop in this movie. They like foreshadow a lot of things in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
They a lot of times throughout before Gage's untimely death, there's a lot of scenes where it shows him playing with trucks. He plays with a red truck in the house. There's a box. They're unpacking boxes, and there's boxes of Gage's toys that say trucks, Gage's trucks. Also, at the very beginning of the movie, when they first introduce us to the road, or as Judd Crandall would call it, the Rud, they introduce us to the road, and by introducing it, the way that they introduce it is they have a truck drive by, and they give you like, it's really eerie, almost like a 3 foot off the ground view of the truck coming, kind of what Gage probably would have seen in his last moment. So there's a lot of things that they did really well in this movie, and it's a classic. It actually until recently, I don't think it's actually gotten the respect that it deserves, because it's a fantastic movie, and there's been a number of adaptations of King's work, and they all really fall short, especially for the longer books. It seems like the longer books end up being, the movies get rushed and they're just not very good. One of his other really good adaptations that was done is Silver Bullet, based on Cycle of the Werewolf. But Cycle of the Werewolf is a much shorter story, and I think that that's why it translates so well into a standard length feature. But Pet Sematary is excellent. I've read the book, like I said, and heard the audiobook. So I haven't watched the movie a whole lot of times. I do own the movie, but I've read the book so many times. Like, I don't, just don't need to see the movie a whole bunch.
Mm-hmm.
But the last time I watched it, it had been a little while since I'd seen it, and I just forgot how awesome it was, how like well it was shot, and it's just great. And the fact that you get Herman fucking Munster,
Oh yeah,
as Judd Crandall, that is like the perfect casting. There's not a better person, reading the book and then also hearing Michael C. Hall, his take on it, and then the movie it could not have been a better casting for that role. In fact, that's one of my biggest concerns about the newest incarnation, which we will get to towards the end of the program.
Yeah, it's this Pet Cemetery is it's one of my favorites. I really like this movie. I like like you were talking about all the little foreshadowing stuff, and when Rachel gets picked up when she's trying to get back to the house and she gets picked up by that truck and he drops her off. You see 666 under the door and stuff like that. At the end of this movie, when Rachel comes back from the dead after he buries comes back, I feel like we really get a glimpse into Lewis's fantasy world, and it's a twisted, necrophiliac, disturbing image. She's like got this stuff oozing out of one of her eye sockets, and he's just like, "Come here, baby." It's just.
Yeah, he doesn't mind at that point, But God, what a fucked up story! What a crazy movie! Just wow. So the sickening statistics for this little ditty are as follows: 3 corpses, which seems like a low number, but when they all reanimate and kill people, it's just enough. Actually, you know what? We need to throw Victor Pascow in there as well. I forgot about Victor, since he does stay around most of the movie. So we actually have 4 corpses. It's hard to remember that Victor's not alive. So 4 corpses, 1 reanimated cat, 1 reanimated toddler, 1 reanimated housewife, 1 progressively deteriorating dead college student, and last but certainly not least, 1 disgusting bedridden sister nightmare flashback. Zelda is a disgusting little beast. She is probably one of the most terrifying parts of this entire movie, and she really makes my skin crawl. If you haven't seen this movie, you better get off your ass and go watch it. Like ASAFP. Because if you're going to watch the remake, it is essential that you see the original first. The gore score for this flick is a 7. I'm bringing it up a little bit. We've been kind of in the dumps lately with the gore score, but there is some disgusting shit in this movie. And it's not necessarily gory in the blood and guts form. Of course, we do have Victor Pascal, but there's just some nasty shit in this movie. So we're going to go with a 7. So the movie is largely based on Indian burial grounds. So let's get a little bit deeper into the world of Indian burial grounds.
Yeah, Indian burial grounds are a thing of both fear and interest, but the real question is, are they a place of darkness and power? So do the spirits of the fallen harness the power to terrorize and haunt all those who disrespect them, or
Yes.
Well, businessman Conley T. Snitto opened Lake Shawnee Amusement Park in West Virginia back in the 1920s, and I'm sure he wasn't aware, of what he was getting into. But after 6 people died, including 2 children, in a series of horrific accidents over the years, I'm sure he started rethinking these things. The park near Mattoaka in Mercer County was closed and abandoned in 1966 and left open to the elements. And if you see pictures of this joint, it's pretty creepy. It's got that old, like, Chernobyl looking look to it. And it's just.
It was open for 46 years? Or like roughly 46 years?
Open for a long time. Yeah.
God damn.
So, the deaths that occurred there is a little boy that drowned, and the son of the land's new owner, Gaylord White, claims to have seen a ghost of a girl in a bloody pink dress, which this ghost could be that of a little girl who was on an actual swing set that was at the park when a truck reversed down a hill and ran into her and killed her instantly.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's an archaeological dig on the site in 1988 found that 13 Native American bodies, a lot of them children. And where these bodies came from, apparently the owner of this house, originally the Indian tribe, killed his children, and so he got his revenge and killed massacred all the Indians that came and killed his children back in 1783. Um, Another more famous case of Indian burial ground hauntings is a site that inspired one of the most famous horror movies, the Amityville Horror.
Yeah.
As many of you know, the story of George and Kathleen Lutz and their experience at the famous house in Long Island, New York. While George and Kathleen were trying to find out why their new homestead was so haunted, a member of the Amityville Historical Society revealed to them that the site of their home had once been used as a Shinnecock Indians burial ground.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was actually an enclosure for the sick, mad, and dying. These unfortunates were pinned up there until they died of exposure. Yeah,
Jesus, what a heinous fucking place that was.
Anson further claimed that the Chinook did not use this tract as a consecrated burial mound because they believed it to be infested with demons. So
they put all their dregs and drovers there.
Yeah, pretty much. But when paranormal researcher Hans Holzer and psychic medium Ethel Johnson Myers investigated the Amityville house, Johnson Myers channeled the spirit of a Shinnecock Indian chief who told her that the house stood on a Native American burial ground. So
damn.
Yeah, so that's probably why ancient burial grounds have been the subject of a lot of movies and stories.
Yeah. Poltergeist.
Yep. It's weird. You think about it, like how we put so much belief in the Native American burial grounds and the spirits, and it got me to thinking. You think Native Americans and why we think that their burial grounds or why their burial grounds would even be so strong in the spirit world and stuff. But you think about it, and the Native American people are, they're people who lived on the earth and they were about the earth and the spirits and, stuff like that. And you wonder if, like, a lot of subject matter that's come up that in the worlds that we get into is a lot of like the collective consciousness and the universe being a consciousness and stuff. So if the Indians were so spiritual and earthy and all that, maybe they could have they couldn't been able to go between the dimensions and the spiritual stuff. So that's why they have so much power when they die and they get on these burial grounds and stuff. I don't know, just a thought.
Indians. What's really awesome about Native Americans is that with all the organized religions that have popped up in the last 2,000 years or so, there's always so many differences and there's so many different ways that people look at different things. But the Indians, the Native Americans, they were the most directly tied to their spirituality. There's not another group of people that I can think of that is more closely tied to their life and their spirituality all being one. Almost everything that they did had something to do with a very, very spiritual meaning. So I think it's no wonder that it carries on into the afterlife.
Yeah, because you always hear the stories of them communicating with the Native Americans that have gone on before them. Like I just wonder if they were that connected. And people believe that if you're so much so that the torture of their people, that people thought that they would come back and haunt them. So if you're the wife of Wirt Winchester, you're so afraid of spirits of the Native American people killed by the rifles made by your family that you build a home with secret rooms and stairs that lead to nowhere so that spirits can't find you and have their revenge.
Right.
But another,
yeah, she was like batshit crazy over it.
Yeah, she was. She never stopped construction until she died. So, another mention of a Native American mysterious creature in Pet Sematary. When Judd and Lewis are traveling through the woods and they hear that crash followed by that high pitched scream, and Judd tells Lewis, "Oh, it's only a loon." That loon is the Wendigo. Which if you don't know what that is, it's a cryptoid of Native American folklore. It said that it was a hunter that had gotten lost during a brutal winter, and his intense hunger drove him to cannibalism. And once he got a taste for human flesh, he becomes a crazed monster that wanders the woods looking for more human flesh to eat. So, some people say he's a relative of Bigfoot. Others say he's more like a werewolf. But most people say that, that have described it, has said, and this was interesting to me, was that he had his skin stretched across his bones, like you could see his bones through his skin, which reminds me of when Rachel Creed's having flashbacks about her sister. That's exactly what her sister looked like.
Yeah, nasty old Zelda.
Yeah, and if you watch the, we'll talk about this later. If you watch the second trailer for the new Pet Sematary, it seems that they're gonna be integrating the Wendigo more into the remake than like they did.
Yeah,
in the
I think
book.
so. I think it's gonna be a lot more of a like spiritual type tale. So, for what you streaming this week, of course, we're gonna keep it in the vein of Pet Sematary. You better be streaming 1992's Pet Sematary 2. Just a quick little synopsis. A young boy, played by Edward Furlong, and his father, played by Anthony Edwards, move to the dreaded town of Ludlow, Maine, and soon discover the powers of the Pet Sematary. I might have called this movie a piece of shit last episode, but it isn't really. It's not. It's not an overall terrible movie. You got a lot of those early '90s typical characters popping up. A lot of familiar faces in this movie. But anyway, the cemetery freaks in this one include his dog, his friend's psycho stepdad, and sweet mommy dearest.
Yeah.
It's a pretty decent movie. I mean, it's definitely worth a watch. I would say if you were going to make a week out of it for Pet Sematary Week, you could go ahead and watch it on Amazon Prime.
Yeah. What's interesting about that one is, Mary Lambert said that the original concept for that film was going to involve Ellie Creed, the only surviving Creed from the first movie, but they didn't know how a movie starring a teenage girl would go over, so they changed what we got, with their.
Well, they definitely should have done it with Ellie. It was a good movie, but yeah, I think that probably would have been better. So if you're as amped up as we are to go see the new one, go ahead and watch part 2. So before we go to Creeper in the Theater and our main event, Pet Sematary 2019, let's go ahead and play the trailer for part 2.
Hey, what are you doing?
Getting things ready for Mom.
Mom is dead, Jeff.
She doesn't have to be.
Something strange.
Now, I didn't think much about it until I saw him drag the body out of the coffin.
Something ancient.
Bury your own.
Something evil.
Was it your idea of a joke to send me blood from a dead animal?
This dog is alive.
Not this dog.
Something terrifying is happening in Ludlow, Maine. Again.
Pick up your family and get the hell out of that town.
Pet Sematary 2.
Jeff, honey. Father and I need to talk.
Some stories just won't stay dead.
So all in all, not a terrible trailer, but hopefully it inspired you to go watch part 2 on Amazon Prime. And now, the moment we have all been waiting for. Creeper in the Theater, featuring Pet Sematary 2019. This is probably one of the most anticipated horror movies of the last 5 years. Starring Jason Clarke and John Lithgow, the reimagining of the classic 1989 movie, as well as the book, has gotten a lot of people's interest. And I think from what I've seen, it looks like a pretty good movie. But let's start with the trailer and then we can go from there.
In
today. LA discovered a charming little landmark.
The Pet Cemetery.
Place to bury our pets and remember them. Well, it seems scary, but it's not. Perfectly natural. Just like dying is natural.
Old town's been using this place for generations. Folks make a kind of ritual out of it. It's not some campfire story.
Saw these in the trees up there.
They're warnings. The local tribes carved them before they fled. They feared that place. There's something up there. Something that dates way back. Those woods belong to something else. Something
That cat was dead.
that brings things back.
Cheers.
I know what you're thinking of doing. But they don't come back the same.
Daddy.
What's going on?
Hug your daughter.
I should never have shown you that place. Your child is not the only thing that will come back.
The barrier is broken. We have a second chance.
Sometimes dead is better.
All right, so that is a really good trailer. I think, I'm just hoping that, as we get ready to go check this movie out when it premieres, I hope that they, like you were talking about earlier, didn't put all the good tidbits into this trailer. And the problem is that, it seems to be a trend now, like you don't just get one trailer. There's trailer 1, trailer 2, the new trailer, the final trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just give me one good trailer and let's not give too many tidbits so you don't ruin everything.
Yeah, I'm really concerned that they spoiled the most interesting part of the movie, which it appears that Ellie is taking the fall in this one, and instead of Gage, and that she might be the one that's coming back from the grave. So that would have been a really big twist that they could have dumped on us. Stephen King said that this movie's terrifying, but like we talked about in the past, he he says that a lot. So
he's just a scary dude. I think he's just scared of everything.
I know. But you know what's really scary? Whenever he starts talking about politics, I'm like, dude, you write movies about vampires and werewolves and pet cemeteries. Like, obviously, you've got a weird brain. But I think this movie looks really good. Jason Clarke is a bad motherfucker. He plays in a bunch of good movies. I don't even need to see the movie to tell you, but I completely disagree with John Lithgow being cast as Judd Crandall. I think that's terrible. I think whoever made that decision was being lazy. They just went and looked for a classically known old dude, and they could have done a lot better. That's a really important part of this story, but
it's hard to come back from Herman Munster.
I know, but there's other people. There's so many people they could have done that would have been better than John Lithgow, and I think that is a big weakness going into this movie. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. It takes an incredible amount of goodness to get me into a movie theater in 2019. But I really, really intend on going to see this one in theaters. I think it's going to be a real bang up movie. Before we wrap up this PS saga, I want to say one final word. I recently heard that Steven Spielberg said that he thinks movies on Netflix shouldn't be considered for awards. And I really thought that was a hoe move from him. You know, if he would stop making silly ass movies that he's been making in the last few years and start focusing on what made him a great in the industry, he wouldn't be worried about whether or not movies on Netflix win awards or not. I just, what a stupid subject to even have an opinion on when you're Steven fucking Spielberg.
Is he stream shaming people now?
I know, it's ridiculous. Like, I don't understand what the argument is. I watched a really good movie on Netflix last night, and it was a Netflix original called The Highwayman, and it has every right to be considered for any award that it's eligible for. I meant to talk about this last week and I forgot, but that is just such a hoe move, and you would never hear John Carpenter or anybody in our genre specifically saying something so foolish. But what?
Yeah,
that's really weird.
Netflix has really been coming in hot with the content, especially the Netflix original. Even the Haunting of Hill House and movies like that are some really good shows.
And they absolutely deserve to be considered for awards. Sure. There's nothing different about what they're doing compared to what they're doing for theater movies, except for maybe they get to play outside the lines a little bit and not having to kiss everybody's ass in Hollywood. I don't know. Maybe they still do. But Steven Spielberg, quit being a little bitch and just worry about yourself. And if you want to win an Academy Award over a Netflix movie, start making better movies. It's not the 70s anymore. Now that I'm off my soapbox, it's probably about time that we saddle up and hit the road. If you have any comments or feedback, please drop us a note at downrightpodcast@gmail.com. And if you would like to keep up with all of our shenanigans, follow us, like us, share us, Facebook, Instagram, @downrightpodcast. Thanks for tuning in.
Stop it!